All right, traders, welcome to March Madness. Today is Thursday, March 16th, and this is your end of day market recap. Risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. Everything that we're going through here is for information purposes only, but please read that full risk disclaimer right there. So theme of the day, obviously massive move in tech cues. Yes, I call a little bit of March Madness because there's just a lot of events that are going on right now and taking place, and definitely a lot of market moves. So in this video, what I will do is I will go over where there was strength in this market, where I think there's opportunities. We'll talk about some of the other things that are going on. Obviously, there's a lot of macro things going on right now in this market, big picture things, right? And then of course there's always the micro factors too, like what names are, what stocks, what groups are moving, what stocks are moving, right? And that's why, what I try to do at Tribeca Trade Group is kind of really put those two things together with an emphasis too on talk a little bit of macro here today, because we had the ECB meeting today. They raised interest rates over in Europe up 50 basis points. They kind of did what they planned to do. And then, basically, I didn't really, because this was going on during the trading day. Usually the ECB meeting is much earlier, but because of the daylight savings time, the ECB announcement was at 9:15, and then once the press conference started, it was already when the market was open here. So usually that's at least an hour before time, but it's kind of weird because the US changed times and Europe didn't. So everything's a little bit off. So I didn't get to listen as closely as I normally do to that, but I think what they were how they kind of left the press conference was basically that they're going to be in like wait and see mode, right? So they chose to do the 50, and I think they chose to kind of and again, don't send me angry things because I just haven't had a chance to kind of go through, but I think basically they said that that they still want to combat inflation, but I think they're going to be more in a wait and see type mode. Regardless, right? And again, it's neither here nor there. What's important is the reaction, like what you're seeing in the price action. And then after that, after the ECB was Janet Yellen, and I think she tried to calm markets a little bit, basically saying that they'll be there if they need to be, right? And then of course you're seeing money going towards one of these banks, these FRC banks. So it's a lot to kind of digest, all of these macro things, as well as what interest rates are doing, as well as what currencies are doing. So my approach is always like, to understand some of these moves and understand when there's something to really be paying attention to. We've heard a lot about liquidity. We've heard about all types of bond volatility, right? And these things are pretty crazy. And they're pretty scary too, when you kind of, hear that the bond volatility has been the highest that it's been, that's nothing to kind of sneeze at. So, what do you do when you're encountered with all these circumstances, but yet like a day like today where there was a lot of good trade, setups, right? So here's the move index, which Merrill Lynch puts out, or Bank of America Merrill Lynch puts out. It's kind of like a weighted volatility across all treasuries. Sorry, I just ruined this. Sorry about that. I'll bring this, just fix this. I wanted to just increase the time. And there we go. There's a 5-year, right? So that's the bond volatility, right? And meanwhile, you hear people like, "Oh, geez, this is not a good place to take risk," and so forth. This market's too dicey. It should be going down. Yada yada yada. So there's a lot of that fear out there, right? But you have to understand that. And this is what makes macro analysis so tricky, is it's not always if this happens, then this happens, right? There's a lot of other factors that are at play here. One of which I talked about yesterday, which I thought that if you move out, so That's the bond volatility. So we'll get through some of this complicated stuff first, and then we'll talk about today's moves in stocks. Again, we kind of go through the big picture first, the macro, and then I'll go to the stock moves. But again, like this is a big thing, right? You're basically taking away 100 basis points of rate increases. Where am I getting 100 basis points from? Well, when you look at July and where we were just a week ago, right? So you could bring this up from this is the last year, I think. Yeah, this is the last year. So what we want to be looking at here is just the 1 month, right? So if you look at the last 1 month, right, and going out to July, and again, this is cumulative. So looking at all the Fed meetings between the one in March and then the subsequent meetings that get you to July. Through July, we were anticipating, or the market was pricing in 100 basis points, 1% of further Fed hikes. Now you look at this and it's basically zero. Now, again, there may be an interest rate hike next week. There may not be, but ultimately you're bringing down where there was going to be another 1% of interest rate hikes. And this is what the market was pricing in last week, to now all of a sudden zero. Right. So that's a big change, and there's going to be some benefits to that, and there's going to be some not. And clearly with the move that you're seeing in, tech stocks and the Qs, right, it's a big benefit to them. And, so that was like the question of the day yesterday that I got in the trading room. Geez, I don't understand this move in the Qs. Why? This doesn't make sense. I would argue that it does make some sense. Now, again, there's a lot of different factors. Like there's still a lot of mess going on in the bank. So it's always this, how many factors are good, how many factors are bad, and then ultimately what's going on in the price action. Are you seeing setups? What's doing particularly well? What's not doing well, right? So again, I concentrate a lot on relative strength, right? Relative strength can be there for a decent amount in a group, and then it can change really quickly, right? If the macro picture does change, like this changed last week, and this week, then things are going to change very quickly. Things that weren't showing relative strength all of a sudden are, because you've basically have a flip of a switch, right, that's taking place. And other things, like energy stocks and crude, right, and the industrials, which were showing so much strength, right, that has changed too because of all these dynamics going on too. So what helps is to be, on your toes, to be very nimble in trading. And when things don't look good, as we've seen them, we've seen plus 1 month of poor market breadth, more decliners versus advancers, right? Those are signals to tell you that that's not a great environment to be operating in, right? Forget about like buy the dip and things, if you're combining more than just doing things like that, such as, looking at the McClellan Summation Index, something that we talk about just about every other day in this video, that could kind of give you a sense of how much risk that you should be taking in this market, as well as what the VIX is telling you too. All right, and some other, just like we've gone through with our checklist, right, that I went through in Friday's video, and then I went through in Monday's video, right? So bottom line is, I talked about, to kind of continue from yesterday, I talked about being more defensive and being patient, right, and being nimble, right? Well, today, things just look like there was a lot of good setups, and that's how quickly it could change, right? I was expecting, and I was posting charts in our pre-market session. I was saying, hey, this Amazon actually looks pretty good, and it was trading up pre-market. And I was on Benzinga's pre-market show today too, talking about, hey, the semiconductors are one area that's been holding up pretty well, right? And I mentioned AMD. I was like, the AMD is one of the names that I'm holding. I'm not holding a lot of risk, but I'm like, hey, this AMD's been acting really well. So it was a phenomenal day for the semiconductors. That's one group that really has held in there over the last couple weeks, right? And when something like that happens, when the rest of the market's falling and one group is kind of hanging in there and doing decently, that's a sign that something's up in that group. Something, that when the market does kind of regroup, often what happens is those areas, end up being, the market leaders. So I was very impressed by that and the strength by the semiconductors. But yes, massive move. When you look at the overall numbers, the Qs were up 2.6%. The SPY was up 1.7. And bonds actually gave back today, so they were up big, and they gave back a lot of those early gains. And in fact, TLT finished down on the day. Gold wasn't really much, didn't have any momentum today, finished up slightly. And the big move in the VIX today. So down 12%. Areas that gained a lot was actually the regional banks, and a big comeback for the energy group. They did finish up 2.7%. Now again, they weren't the best group, but they certainly had some momentum off the throughout the day as crude finished positive for the day after being down again. And here's the semis up 4% for the day. So let's talk about the indices first. So again, that's bigger picture. Now, again, I don't know if really, before we go into the S&P chart, now there's all this business about FRC getting some backing, that these things help, right? And Credit Suisse as well, from the Swiss National Bank. But overall, I don't know if this group is out of the woods. Not, even though up 3.5% and up from the lows of the day where this thing opened, I don't know what they're going to be doing with the rest of these companies, that look like they're in trouble. And I don't know, maybe they do come back. Maybe Western Alliance, which was up 14% for the day, maybe it does come back. Right? PACW was another one too. This stock is still $11. So there's still a lot of damage here, and I don't have the answer here. I'll be watching to see what unfolds, but we'll see if this is kind of the end of the volatility in this group. I was watching Schwab today too. Again, not trading it, but I mean, okay, this is nice. $10, around $10 off the lows, but still, you're still $30 off the highs. So you're at least so. I don't know if these things, what the story is with these things, and if they're supposed to be, if the contagion part of this is wrong, then I would expect these things to be coming back, right? A lot of people are asking about like buying these things. I don't really know why you would want to dip your toe, your foot into this group, unless maybe you could do it options, I guess, but maybe a call spread, something like that. We talked a little bit about that in the trading room yesterday. I get it. People think that, oh, these things are on discount and they're going to come right back up. I don't know. I just think that there's better trading opportunities, right, than trying to go after something just because it's down. To me, it's down for a reason. And again, it depending on your time frame, you hear all types of big investors saying, okay, I'm going to buy Schwab here or whatever name, but it really depends on how long your time frame is. It could take months for these things to come back, and they could go lower first. So there's ways that you could play it, like a call spread, because the option volatility is super jacked. But, everybody asking questions about these things, but I just think there's so much better trading opportunity. So let's talk about some of that, right? So first of all, S&P, right? We're still below the 200-day moving average. This still, even though it had a nice day, I would go back to the, like, one day is not a trend. So it gets us out of this range. It gets us back above the 5-day moving average, which is a start. But it's still going to have to contend with a lot of overhead stuff here, right? 200-day moving average, 20-day moving average, 50-day moving average. That's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds. Shorter term picture, definitely a nice move here, right? And getting above the 200-period moving average, right? This was a sticking point. The bottom of value, we kind of price failed here a few times. Where the real nice move obviously was in the Qs today, right? And I was surprised. I didn't think that we were going to get that big of a move, but this is just a much cleaner technical setup, right? So yes, 309.53 will be the next area of resistance. Up 2.6%, just blew past. I was in the Qs today and I took profits right at 302 very early in the morning. And then I traded some single stocks a little bit after that. But, and it also went through that 304 VPOC no problem too. So really nice, volume will do that. Heavy volume will get you through overhead supply, right? So I think that's what we had today. And what was really interesting, and this was my thought, earlier in the day, was basically, I was looking at this morning, going all the way back to our charts channel this morning, but, Amazon, I was talking, 8:27, I posted this right before our pre-market session, just so we could kind of talk about it. And then Google, I said, once this kind of got going, I mean, Google had a huge day. Right, I said if it got above those candles here, it certainly did that. This one went right up to this 1 hour VPOC, by the way. So that's a good place for in the short term to be taking some profits. But I think I said earlier, like, hey, I could be playing Google, I could be playing Amazon. I have it written down somewhere in the trading room. But I said they're big components of the Qs. I'd rather just go the Qs, and I know exactly where I want to, take a trade off and play that trade earlier. Play that trade in terms of taking profits. So again, sometimes you can kind of, you could choose whether or not you're going to play the index or the individual names. But if it's something like the FANG stocks, right, you can just play the Qs because they're the big components in the Qs. This move was absolutely amazing today, what happened in AMD. Really, really impressive. I took targets. I think I took my target here. And then, of course, I looked for some other opportunities, but I mean, this was a huge move, and it does look like this thing is trying to get to this 97.57 VPOC here on the daily chart. So really nice. This was a name that I've been tweeting about the last couple of days. I think 2 days ago, when really nobody was really putting out charts, I said, hey, this AMD looks like it's trying to break higher. And it's just amazing the move that it had today, up 7.7% today. So here's trade blotter, and yeah, where did I end up selling this thing today? 92.70. So of course, it had a monster day follow through, but I did get into Nvidia too. So I want to talk a little bit about that name. Of course, like I could spend probably 20 minutes talking about all the semi names today. Again, it's a group that I've liked for a while. But I really like, if you turn over to Nvidia, what's really nice about this is that this took out this virgin point of control. And this is a good example of sometimes what happens. Sometimes you see a fade, right? So here's one, for example. Sometimes you can get up to a virgin point of control. Again, what is a virgin point of control? It's an area where a lot of buyers and sellers previously met up, right? And which price hasn't returned to, right? And it's a point of control from another period, right? So in this particular period, right, this was the value area back in September, right? And here's the point of control. Notice how price did not pass through this point of control. So that leaves what's behind a virgin point of control, right? Because we haven't revisited this high volume area. So notice what happened on this one, right? We tagged that and faded. This one, we kind of hung around for a little bit, right? So there are definitely areas to kind of like pay attention to. I use them a lot of times just to take targets. Like look at this one back here, right? This was a perfect takeout, right? And then, the stock went higher after that. So this was the takeout here. And we basically came in and we retested the 20-day moving average, really nice candle here. And it's very bullish to me when you can get above that area of high volume, right? And we did that today. Now, what's really nice is we don't have anything really up. Excuse me. This is an extension away from the March value area. So it's these kind of act like speed bumps sometimes. So that's 262. And then the next thing up is 300. And if you look at the weekly chart in Nvidia too, notice that you don't have any major resistance either. All right. And notice the consolidation above its value area for the year, right? Which means it's trending, right? So you can see on the left of your screen, uptrending. When we're inside value, we're range bound. We're chopping around sideways, but when we're above value, we are trending, right? Also on the 1 hour chart, right? Notice you don't have any of those red lines up here either, right? So it's much better when you don't have those red lines, those version point of controls that are nearby, right? That means if it wants to, and again, you still have to have, nothing goes on its own, right? You have to have buyers in this thing, right? So do we have a catalyst in Nvidia? Well, if you look at the events that are for the next week, yes, Nvidia has a development conference next week, right? So it's keynote as well as Capital Markets Day. You got a lot of things going on for Nvidia next week. So what's one of my favorite trades? Let's buy the rumor, sell the news, right? Investors like to own because they don't know what's going to happen on their keynote day. So it gets bid up sometimes. Nothing's 100%, but a lot of times it's buy the rumor, sell the news. Take, for example, on Tesla's day that they had their investor day, right? Everybody wanted to own Tesla going into their investor day. Oh, who knows if they're going to, announce some type of a model, right? Well, what happened on their investor day? Hardly, they didn't have an announcement of any new models, so the stock sold off. Buy the rumor, sell the news, right? So that's my plan for this trade because I am long. I did take some off the table on, a ginormous move like it made today, but very, very strong, and I plan to own it into the beginning of next week. Next, I mean, again, we could go through a bunch of these charts, but Applied Materials got over the value area. ALGM has been another really strong small name that found support right at the bottom of value. Since then, reversed. Right. Another name, this is a name that I got into today because once it gets to the lower range, it's gotten bought. I don't know if it will continue to trend, but I have a trailing stop on the balance. I did take a couple targets in this, but here's what I'm referring to. And again, you can kind of see these things on the 1 hour chart a little bit better, but notice a couple times in here, right? Gets to the bottom of the range, this like 200 period moving average, right? It's been hanging in there, right? It's been trending. Again, it hasn't been perfect. It's kind of got erratic a little bit the last couple days, but or the last couple weeks. But support here comes into support down here again. Bought. So again, I bought in here today. I didn't catch the perfect bottom, but that's fine. And again, I took 2 targets in this one today. Whoops. Yeah, here it is. Boom. All right, another one too that worked out for me. This was a name that we saw almost $1 million of call premium. I think I went over this in yesterday's video. I did take this trade off today. It was up 6% because it's into the bottom of value on the 1 hour. And I think it actually did make it above value. So it'll be on my radar for tomorrow because I wasn't sure if it was going to get rejected there at 95.75, but it made it through it. So I took this trade off. This is a trade that I added in the morning. At 95.80. I'm content with that, and I'll watch it again tomorrow. Again, you kind of have to pick and choose in this market. Remember yesterday's video, right? I was talking about how it's difficult to be wearing a lot of risk in here. So, I think going back to the macro and the micro analysis, right? I don't know if we're out of the woods for this bank situation, because I think there's still some other banks out there that, that look that look vulnerable. So you have to balance with how much risk that you're going to hold in this market, and thus realizing as well, just like today, you didn't really need to be owning a lot into today because I think the Qs almost went red in the beginning of the day. So right now this market's giving us some great trading days, and that's why you pick and choose with what you want to carry, right? So that's why I basically sold that SMCI. So that's a little bit of a explanation about how I kind of think about the day, how I look at relative strength areas, and there's a lot of other names too that look pretty interesting. This Dual, which is a name I had my eye on. Again, I did not trade this one, but real nice candle here, bullish engulfing, and it's been making its way back up. Another one, it's on my radar for tomorrow, is First Solar. Right, First Solar had this monster move, right? Back checking in here. I've been kind of waiting for it to come into the 20-day moving average. Sometimes the strong names sometimes don't dip that much. So I think this is very interesting in here too. And, it's on my, maybe a day trade for me tomorrow. We'll see, but I like the look of it. A couple other names too that I was going over towards the end of the day. We talked about Mobileye looks interesting too. And even Apple, right? Apple's not a name that I trade that much, but it kind of looks like there's an inverted head and shoulders going on here. Maybe a left shoulder in here, head, right shoulder, and neckline. So we'll see. 162.69 could be where this thing goes if there's more momentum within tech. All right, guys, I think that's enough. I talked a lot about a lot of things. Make sure that you like the video. Also, check out our trading room. Right, I try to provide continuous analysis as we go shift through the day, as well. Our pre-market session, right, I start that somewhere around like about right around like 10 after 9 these days, and we go through setups and must watch areas for the day. So I mean, that's an important 20 minutes going into the open, but you have to be a member to do that. So if you like this analysis, I've been getting some really good feedback. I appreciate that in these videos, but this is just like the tip of the iceberg about, what we do. So, a lot more goes into, the risk management and the taking targets and all of that. So, guys, have a great night, but check out TribecaTradeGroup.com. See what it's like to be a member. And, I'd love to hear your feedback about it. Thanks so much. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.